Hi there, it's Rick Hansen on Amazing Greats, and here we go. We're talking with the author of a book that shares 31 stories, 31 pearls of wisdom, and tons of laughs. I know you're going to be inspired by my friend Rick Enloe as he shares his life, his wit, and his wisdom on Amazing Greats. We're talking with Rick Enloe, author Rick Enloe, podcaster. He is a spiritual counselor. He's a pastor, a news talk show host. You've got it
Yeah.
all. My
Well,
gosh.
so far, one time, Rick, somebody asked me for my resume, and so I thought, okay, and so I typed out all the stuff I'd done, and they said, you know what, you're really good at is former, because I was the former everything, former pastor, former talk show host, former, so I was like, okay, well, I guess that's
Yeah.
what I'm, that's what I'm good at.
We're seeing with the former Rick
Yeah, yeah,
Enloe. Yeah.
yeah, that's it.
So let me first describe how you and I kind of connected in all transparency, where this is coming from in terms of our personal relationship.
Yeah,
So I was a fallen away Catholic, had been away from the church for a long time, and then stumbled into a church which wasn't even a church. It was a boys and girls club in Gig Harbor. And on stage was this raucous band playing the greatest music I've heard in a long while. And it all had to do with Jesus. And I'm thinking, wow, this is not like the Catholic church that I used to go to.
yeah, a
So
little different liturgy.
different liturgy, same message,
Yeah,
maybe,
right.
but different way to explain it. So then when I saw up on the big screen, it said no church experience required. I said,
Yeah.
okay, this could be my home right here. Then I got up on stage, came this stand-up comic who was kind of a cross between a stand-up comic and a TED talk. And it was just amazing. All of this stuff about the Bible and Jesus and stuff, and it all made sense. And so that is where you came into play yourself, as well as Pastor Gino. And so it was an amazing journey for me. We met
Yeah.
in 2013.
Hmm.
You, I think I got baptized. Actually, I got baptized in 2013 on September 22nd by you and
Awesome.
Gino. So
Yeah.
there's how we know one another. And
Yeah.
that brings us up to date today. So
Right.
enough about me. Let's let's talk about what do you think about me? No,
Whoa, man. Yeah. Let me just think about that. Uh, no, this is great. I love your podcast, and thanks for having me on.
perfect. This is so good. So let's start with the little Ricky Enloe from long
Okay.
ago. And you fittingly were raised in a town that was called Saint John.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I didn't even really, realize it at the time. I just was just where we lived. But yeah, it's almost like it could have been the birthplace of Jimmy John's, or something, because it's St. John. Yeah, it was like very, very spiritual. It's in Whitman County, which is in the eastern part of Washington State. And it's a very interesting story, the whole Whitmans, if you ever want to, Google that up. They were missionaries that came and uh, didn't really pull off the cross cultural move too well and were slaughtered by the natives. And so, that's why we have Whitman College in Walla Walla, and it's just upstate from that, where I lived in this little farming town out in the middle of nowhere.
We're going to show a picture right now. This is a
Oh
picture
yeah.
of St. John
Uh
out in the
huh.
Palouse. That's a huge metropolitan area, it looks like.
Not a single stoplight. In fact, when I was there, this true story, there were no street signs. Since then, they've decided to put in street signs named after, like, the people who live on the street, so like Johnson Street and Smith Street. But when I was there, like, just houses and no stop signs, no stop lights, just
Uh-huh.
right through Main Street. And one of the things that was kind of funny about it, the town, is that we had a 6-hole golf course. So if you wanted to play 18, you had to do 3 laps. And then we had a police officer that was actually the insurance agent, Elmer. He had an El Camino that he would put a battery operated red light on the hood of, only on Friday nights. The town council, I guess, only wanted a Friday night police officer in case, for the kids getting out of the football games and whatever. And if I one time I went blazing through town in my old car, and I didn't even see him, but his car wasn't fast enough our cars in high school, we had that was a muscle car era. We just had amazing cars. His car was just an old beater. And I thought, well, I guess I didn't get pulled over. I got home that night. My dad said, hey, you got a ticket. Elmer just went to my dad's house. He went to my house and just knocked on the door and said, Rick, he was speeding through town. Here's a ticket. So that was like way back in the day, but we had like automated, like speed cameras, even, Elmer style.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite a place to grow up. But one of the things about it is that because I grew up in such a small spot, I kind of, decided, hey, someday I'd like to see how big the world is. So that kind of, added a lot of, sort of juice to some of those goals. So I've kind of been zipped all around the world now. And then as also my dad was like the volunteer pastor of this little church that, that we used to, gather in on Sundays. And he really was the guy who, he had a heart for folks who didn't really fit into, the religious scene, because he had been a guy that, had been kind of down and out as a younger guy. And I didn't even know about it. But when I was 16, I got a job in Yakima, which is like a few hours away. And some guy recognized my last name, and said, well, hey, have you ever heard of this one guy named Mickey? And I go, yeah, I've heard of him. That was my dad. And he says, yeah, well, that guy, he's still famous around here for being, like a crazy person who was, out of control and violent and ended up in jail and all this stuff. He was like a gangster. And I'm thinking, okay, that's not my dad, because he just didn't seem like a really nice guy. But when I got home, I gave, hey, Dad, you know what this guy said? And he kind of got quiet, and he said, well, you never met that guy. He said, I met Jesus before you were born. And when they put me underwater, they raised me up to the guy that. So, he had a real heart for folks like that, had made a few mistakes, and he realized that, it wasn't over for him. So he kind of had that no church experience required vibe.
There was the birth of that idea, huh?
Kind of. And then I think Gino's the one who came up with that actual phrase, but I think the spirit of it was with my dad. And also, he also was somebody who could explain the Bible to people, kind of in layman's terms. And so I think I kind of apple didn't fall too far from the tree on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were the son of a preacher man. Were you destined to be a pastor somewhere along the way? Or was that,
I don't know,
even in your thinking in those days?
Well, like my mom said, if you can do anything else, go for it, because she, she kind of understood the 24/7, responsibility of it, but it just kind of was a fit for me. I think I'm more of a, I've enjoyed it. I like being with people when they're going through maybe not the best day of their life. And at the same time, a lot of people share the best day of their life with us too. So it's kind of up and down, feast or famine, but it's been a great experience. And I think, I think that my understanding of the Bible has been enhanced by so many people that have spoken, into my understanding and have taught me. So that I just kind of want to pass it along,
Yeah.
So
tell me, that's one of my questions. I'm always interested in knowing if you were to pick out like one, maybe two people that were mentors of yours that were really impactful in your journey, in your Christian journey.
Yeah.
Who would those be?
Well, I already mentioned my dad, but there's first guy I ever worked for. I was a youth pastor, and he was like the, boss pastor, the grown up guy, but he was just a wonderful human. And his whole theme, sort of like his major theme in all of life, was love. Kind of Bob Goff is kind of writing books like that nowadays, but he taught, every sermon he ever taught was about love. And he was a super inclusive kind of guy. And I know I had a lot of friends who, when they were first youth pastors, they had to work for, in a church, and they had kind of not good experiences. Mm-hmm. And I had a great experience. I mean, it was just a wonderful guy. And then, when I decided after 6 years, I got an opportunity to, do something different. I became the youth pastor for all the youth pastors in the state in a particular denomination. And that's when I started speaking in high schools. So I would go and, do kind of a stand-up kind of bit in the high school. And then what I found out is that high schools, they always have counselors, and most people think of them as academic counselors, but they're actually equipped to, help students that are going through difficulties. But none of the students ever talk to them hardly. So I created a presentation that was funny and, at the high school level. And hey, guys, let me tell you what the girls are thinking right now, and then back and forth. And then at the end, though, I'd say, but listen, here we are, 3,000 of us in a room, but you can be a lonely person in a crowded place. Some of you, are pregnant, you know what to do. Some of you, are being mistreated and you don't know what to do. Well, and so then they engaged the counseling that was available, at the schools. Well, I started getting letters saying, man, it was like the quietest lunch hour in the entire year. And then all the counselors were saying, we found out all these kids that needed help. And so I kind of had this idea of getting in front of the ambulance, like instead of, trying to help people that are, already hurt. So anyway, it was really good. And I went to 1,100 high schools in the US.
Really? See, now that was a story. That was a part of your story I was not familiar with, but that was one of my questions. How did that all come about? And you just explained that well. So yes.
Well, and see, the reason that sometimes when, you ran into me, or even I run into myself now, is that the reason that people say, well, man, you're pretty good at, the TED Talky sermon, speech comedy thing. Well, I mean, there's my 10,000 hours right there. I mean, I cranked on it for a long time. And I enjoyed it too. It wasn't bad, but I mean, sometimes I do 7 or 8 all school assemblies in a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
how old were you at that point?
I was probably what I was, late 20s, early 30s.
So you were a younger guy and you could relate to him well, and they could relate to you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And then we had 2 boys, and I didn't want to miss out on their, on them. And so this was like super travel intensive kind of endeavor. Yeah. So I thought, wow. And it was kind of one of those, prayer kind of concerns where I said, hey, I wonder what I could do. And then that's when, we had an opportunity to start this church, this community of faith in Gig Harbor. And Gino and I actually were first pastored for 3 or 4 years in Seattle at a big old church that had a pipe organ and stained glass windows, and like a real church. It looked kind of like out of the Middle Ages, or it was like really cool. It was very European, stately, but it was a church, and there were like no Christians.
Oh man! Oh man! Wow.
And then we came to Gig Harbor, and we've been 30 years now with all Christians and no church.
You flip-flopped that.
Yeah, we did.
The script. Yeah.
I never have had the actual like combo yet.
Let's touch briefly on a trip to the Netherlands, to Holland. You were what brought that about? So you spent a year or more there?
Yeah, right. I mean, just a year, but like what happened was I have these goofy ideas that, when I grow up and become an adult, like, when you're a kid, you think, I'm going to stay up as late as I want, which is true now, but I only want to stay up till about 8. But, but like one of the things was I thought 12 years of school was just too much. And, I still remember being a first grader and everybody was like, okay, you're going to do this for 12 years in a row. And I just thought, I'm only 6. That's like 2 life sentences. I can't believe this. So I said to myself as a first grader, when I grow up, I'm not going to have my kids do this. Like, I'm going to have them go like halfway and then take a year off. So when I got married, before we had kids, I told my wife, hey, I want to give our kids a sabbatical, like in middle school or whatever. And she's like, yeah, sounds great. Right. And so I realized, well, that's probably not realistic either. But on one day, I had a radio show, talk show, 9 to noon on CBS in Seattle. And, a program director came in and said, man, you're doing great. I love your show, like that kind of thing. And then the next day he goes, hey, we need to talk. And I'm like, what?
Oh, no.
I thought you liked the show yesterday. He said, well, our station just got sold and they're going to make this a country Western music, station. So, but you know how it is in radio. They said, but hey, listen, I sent your tapes to Cincinnati and they love you. And like, if you want to, and I'm like, well, so, and it's a kind of industry where you got to be willing to move around a lot and keep going to different markets. And I thought, nah, my kids are, they have their buddies in school and stuff. So I said, okay, now, so I came home and my wife worked for back in the day. You remember when the cell phones were like bricks, those big.
Yes.
So she worked for US West Cellular in the kind of business part of it. And that same day, they called her in and said, hey, listen, you guys are all doing great, but we just got purchased by,
Oh
Verizon or
no.
something. I can't remember. And we're moving all operations to Colorado. So if you want to move to Colorado, there's a job for you. So I came home from work and I go, you can't believe it. I mean, my job is over. And she goes, me too. And then I
Seriously.
went,
Wow.
yeah. And I
Talk
went
about a
like,
godsend there, right?
and then I looked at her and I go, sabbatical, and so we kind of didn't just jump at it, but we thought, okay, maybe so. And so, but then we said, well, let's put a sign in the front yard and see if anybody wants to buy our house. And somebody bought it. And well, let's put a sign on the car and see if anyone wants to buy that. Bought it. Okay. And then I called a few people and they go, and specifically I had a friend who lived in the Netherlands. And he said, man, come on over. I could use some help. And so I taught in a little, like a small university there, just one academic year. And so it was pretty fun. But I mean, the kids were good sports about it.
Did you find that, I mean, in your mind, was that God speaking to you in all of that?
Totally. Yeah, because I'll tell you one, I don't want to take up your whole podcast with this story, but I wasn't 100% sure that I wasn't just making this up, because I mean, I thought of it as a first grader. So I was thinking, I don't know if it's a very developed or mature thought. But I thought, well, let's just see how it unfolds. And like I said, things started selling and we were like, oh, well, okay, that's making things possible. And then all of a sudden I'm walking in, I parked my car in the grocery store in Issaquah. And I get out of the car and this guy goes, hey, and he's standing like right by the front door of the store. And I'm looking at him. I'm looking around like, me? And yeah. So he waves me over and I come over and he goes, are you going to the Netherlands? And I go, yeah, we're thinking about it. He goes, well, you're going to help are you going to go teach this guy? And I said, yeah, he invited me to teach. He goes, well, he's a friend of mine. He said, listen, do you guys need any support and, financial support? And I'm like, yes, please. Because we were doing this on a volunteer. I wasn't hired. We were just doing it to help the guy. So we are just going to just, use our, whatever we had saved, So this guy goes, well, listen, come to my house on Friday night. Okay. So I don't even know where his house. So I go to this big, huge house. He's got 5 or 6 other couples there. And he goes, tell him what you're doing. I said, well, I've been invited to help, whatever. And he goes, I know that guy. He's a good guy. He goes, here's what I'm going to give you, Microsoft stock. So just, let me know, what your brokerage account is. And I'm saying, and I'm looking over at Marv like, so you're saying there's something called a brokerage account? I never had, I didn't have one. That's the day I said to the guy, I don't know what that means. And he goes, I'll help you. But and then he says to all these other people, what are you going to do? And I said, I go, hey, just a second. Hey, listen, if this was Marvelly and I, we would have to go home and discuss it, and talk about it. So don't, but just think about it and see what happens. Anyway, those people were huge underwriters for our whole thing. So that's at that point I knew like, okay, something's up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's cool.
How does God talk to you? Is it like speaking in a voice or
No,
thought
I mean,
or?
for me, I'm open to that because, hey, one time a donkey talked, but I don't keep one at my house. One phrase that I borrowed from a guy once, like, I think it's my brother-in-law, but he said, coincidence to your benefit. It's like, you think, oh, this is a coincidence, but boy, that's really to my benefit, And so, that's one way I think, huh, is that a coincidence? Well, yeah, maybe, but it's also, man, really beneficial. So, okay. And then another way is through, friends, good friends like yourself, you might say, hey, man, I've been thinking about you. And I don't know if this sounds goofy, but, I got the idea that, you might need this or that. And I'm like, dude, that's exactly what I've been wondering about, So I think it's more people confirming stuff that you have questions about. And then of course, I mean, I'm a big fan of, slowing down the Bible. I've never been a huge read the Bible in a year kind of thing. It's kind of like somebody go like, read the phone book in a month. It's like, okay. Or how about just look up the numbers of your friends? I mean, like the Bible's like a book that you need to slow down and you need to take it little bit at a time. And you need to stare out the window a lot, and I think that that's been helpful to me because I think sometimes I'll be wandering through something and, well, it's a lot like, I wrote a book.
Tell me about this
Yeah.
book. You wrote a
Anyway, it's a
book.
lot like that. Yeah. So this little book that I got that I just put together, it's really kind of answers that question to some degree. Like how do I think that I hear divine input and direction in my life? Because what'll happen is I'll have an experience, and then when I think about the experience, it just occurs to me that's an important lesson, for me, even though it might be something that happened that, you just think, well, that just happened. So that's all my stories are like that.
You must have pondered them too, because
Uh-huh.
the great recall. I try. I'm reading your book and I'm saying, "Gosh, I don't remember all that good stuff in my past." He must have an incredible memory to be able to bring
Yeah.
all that up. Now that we're talking about the book, it's called Low Hanging Truth,
Mm-hmm.
Short Stories for the Long Haul, and that's what it is. It's 31 stories
Yeah.
that are just not only entertaining, but have a great message. And did you always have that in mind that someday I'm going to take the stuff that I know and put it in a book?
No, I don't think so. But I always admired people who did, and so I thought, well, that seems like quite an endeavor. So I kind of tiptoed around, but it was this invitation from Debbie Maycomber, who's a famous author. She wrote the foreword in this book. She said to me, and we go to church together. And so she comes up to me and says, "Hey, you're a good storyteller, but I don't know if you know how to write." Because she said that's how I was when I first started. I was a storyteller, but I had to learn how to write. So she said, I got this magazine. You want to do an article in the magazine? And then just every time a magazine comes out, they'll have like one of your articles in it. And I think that's the best way to learn how to write, is to have a deadline and just keep working on it. So I did that, and that really was a helpful exercise, and that kind of gave me the discipline of writing. And then so some of these stories are from that. They were I overhauled them a little, rewrote them and stuff, because it was for a particular audience. But then it got me going on this, and so I hope though that this is, when you read the book, like I like what you just said, where you kind of think to yourself, hey, what are some of my stories, and what did I learn from that, kind of,
Yeah.
because I think that's the idea. I'm going to get philosophical just really quickly here,
Oh, I'd love
but
that.
I believe, well, I went to graduate school and got, studied a lot about, narrative communication, which is storytelling, because I believe that's what Jesus was all about. He told stories. I mean, somebody would ask him a question, what do you think about this and that? He'd say, there was a guy who had two sons. He just tells a story. And so I just always love that. And the University of Washington doesn't have a graduate school degree in how Jesus taught, but they do have one in narrative theory. So that's what my degree's in. And what happens is I discovered that a lot of people, have a lot to say about that. But my guy his name is Walter Fisher. He's my main guy that I followed, and he believes that we as humans are actually homo narrans, and so he means like we're storytelling creatures. Like we often think of homo sapien, which is tool making, tool using, but he says we're homo narrans. We only understand things when it's in story form, and there's reasons for that. But one of the things I think I would sum it up this way: we learn most from our own experience, but we learn those experiences more deeply if we document them. So all of us have experiences, but not all of us write down our experiences and then really evaluate them and say, what changed in me because of that? Or what did I learn there? What was the takeaway? And so when you do that kind of an exercise, I think it's really helpful. And so that's kind of what I was after.
And that's a great narrative about journaling, right? That's what
Yeah,
people
that's exactly
should
right.
take
Yeah.
the time and jot it down so that they do remember it.
Yeah.
Obviously, some of the stories that you have are just out of, just remembering them, but
Yep.
journaling is just a great way to do that. And as Socrates once said, speaking of
Yes,
philosophy,
that's
an
right.
unexamined life is not worth living. And
Yep.
so taking these little bits and pieces and examining them and saying, what did I get out of that, really is a useful tool for sure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that, and also I think that I wanted to try to write a book because I have this background in humor as a humorist. I've read a lot of books that I think are funny. David Sedaris writes funny books. Jim Gaffigan's a couple of books that are funny. Tina Fey has a funny book. I mean, a lot of people. I followed Garrison Keillor for a long time. I was raised on Steve Martin's albums. Bill Cosby, man, I had all his albums as a little kid. Now that's like, never mind. But but anyway, I just loved humor. I loved comedy. I mean, I used to watch the Red Skelton show with my dad, and I mean that's so long ago. People don't even know what I'm talking about. But I just was always. I loved like Saturday Night Live. I just thought it was great. So I thought, would it be fun if I wrote a book and told some stories to have a little bit of have some laughter in there somewhere. And it's been fun because some of the responses I've gotten from the book so far have been that people just like laughed out loud. And one guy was telling me he got the book and he saved it for an airplane flight, and it was flying to Phoenix, and he was laughing, and people were asking, "What are you reading?" And I told him, "Dude, I should have given you about 10 of them so you could hand them out." But anyway, that's kind of.
Did you ever have thoughts of being a stand-up comic? Did you ever try that?
Oh yeah,
in a secular way.
I've done that. I've done that a lot. I worked some clubs, but that wasn't as fun for me as I did a whole stand-up deal for college students. Those are my favorite audiences, because they're, what happens, this with comedy, you go A, C, and then you wait a second and the crowd goes B. I see, I get it. And so what's funny is like some audiences, you go A, C, and then you wait for a second, and then you go, and it's B. Okay. Like you have to tell them, and then they go, oh, yeah. And so, but with college students, you go A, C, you don't even say C, and they've already filled it in. Really? And they're just fun to perform in front of. And in fact, what I'm thinking about doing, Rick, I'm just going to lay it out there. I'm thinking about doing a 1-hour comedy special. I'm thinking about just doing one and just throwing it on YouTube and just, how great would that be if like your grandpa did a comedy special,
And clean comedy is difficult to find. You got Jim Gaffigan. We did an interview on Amazing Greats here with a guy named Jeff Allen, who does.
Yes, Jeff Allen's great.
Yeah, does all great humor, and you really have to be good at your craft to avoid, slipping into that routine of foul language and.
Yeah, because what happens is, it's hard work to really capture a crowd and take them somewhere. And I think when you get tired, the path of least resistance is just to say things that are shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and there's a lot of that. But I do think that whole dry bar comedy scene, they finally figured that out, that, you go to places where like people are so conservative, they don't drink. And I actually don't really like a crowd like that as much as just slightly not dry bar. You know what I mean?
A little loosey bar.
Yeah, just slightly. It's like, have you ever been to an auction? You think like, could everyone please have a glass of wine before we start the bidding? That's that's the way to do it.
Well, one thing about the book, when I bought it and got it on Kindle, because I wanted to read it really quickly before you had your kind of launch party the other day.
Yeah, right. That was fun.
But one of the things I was a little bit surprised about was that because you're my pastor, right, that I thought it was going to be much more of a Christian preaching, teaching book, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They asked me, is it a Bible study? I'm like, no, it's, I think what it is, you tell me if you think this is accurate. I think when you get done reading this book, you think, I feel like I kind of know the guy a little bit. That's what the book's about.
Absolutely.
And, since I am a follower of Christ, I talk about, hey, times when I prayed, and I talk about, I have stories, but I also have stories that are just about like doing CPR on a guy who was choking on meatloaf. I got, I one of my favorite titles is "Don't Be a Dickie," because, I found this old, mock turtleneck in my drawer, and my kids had never seen one. And
so leasing a car is like having a dickie, right? You don't really own it. I mean, it's not really the real thing, but
yeah. And I had somebody, like a teenager, say to me the other day, the Dickies made a comeback. And I didn't know that, but I said, all right. There's a few chapters that include others that I've met and walked with and stuff. One of them was, a guy whose daughter died from leukemia when she was 19. and I shined his shoes because I didn't know what else to do. And so I went and had a lunch and before the book was published and said, "Hey, I wrote this. Would you mind reading it and let me know if it's okay?" It was like a really cool moment where he kind of teared up at he was sitting at this, just quietly reading it, and he looked up and he just said, "Yeah, man, do it." And so that was pretty cool. And then the one chapter I have about the guy at the grocery store who calls me big guy.
Yeah.
I went to the grocery store and said to the guy, "Look, I didn't name you, by name, but I wrote a chapter about you." And I said, "I hope you have a good sense of humor," because at the end,
you took a
it
little
comes
bit of
around.
offense to being called the big guy. For those who haven't,
Yeah, like I said here, let me just. Is it okay if I just read this little part of there?
Sure.
Like, here's the reason why. Because when he was just being a nice guy, it was like a term of endearment. It was like when he saw me, he'd say, "Hey, dude," be like, "Dude," but he called me big guy. "Hey, big guy," but what I heard was, "Hey, oversized human." Or, "Hey, morbidly obese man," and it made me think I probably shouldn't eat today, or I wonder if my shirt could be used as a jib sail on a small schooner. So I just talk about how it was kind of wrecking my trips to the grocery store because I thought, yeah, maybe I am too big, but anyway, the whole story resolves pretty good because now I look forward to having him call me big guy. But
Yeah.
Anyway, it was fun. It's been really fun.
The whole book is filled with those kinds of stories. Some of the ones that our listeners will have an opportunity to hear about is your I think it was greeting card sales.
Yeah, yeah.
Which was a
That's when
great story. Yeah.
yeah. I had 35 boxes of cards I had to sell, and I learned a lot through that experience. That's when I investigate. That's when I first ran into the disappointment gap.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The
I think that's
prize at the end was not such a big prize after all. But let's not.
and what I did? I did artwork. I like sketching. I'm just a sketchy, kind of guy. And I have this little sketchbook I run around with, and sometimes just to kill time, I'll sketch things. And even when I had long airplane flights, I'd sketch a guy in the seat in front of me. Not well, not a great likeness, but I'd get the main idea there. And then underneath it, I'd write, "He was a lonely man who had traveled." I just make up some story about the guy. Anyway, so but every one of the chapter, kind of, instead of having just a chapter 22, I wanted to do a little sketch. So that was fun for me because I kind of illustrated the book as well.
Yeah. I want you to do a podcast sketch for Amazing Greats, so we can put that up in the podcast as well. Will you do that?
Do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you got the coffee shop story. You got the great story about your friend who was 90 plus years old, Edith.
Yeah.
You told the story about a kid named Kenny. That was a fascinating little story as well. And what a great heartwarming story that was. 31 stories, 31 chapters. Everyone is packed with like humor. It's packed with wisdom, and it's so well written. It's just a joy and a pleasure to skip through and just enjoy. I mean, your word craft, the words that you used were sometimes just amazing. So,
well, thanks,
very
Rick.
well
I appreciate
done.
that. When I get to the last chapter, I happen to mention, that it's entitled "Advice for Those I Love." So I start off, talking about a kind of a funny event that happened to me, but then I kind of get into this thing and, I kind of give advice. And then at the very end of it, I say, after I try to apply the advice, the advice is keep your chin up and keep moving, so chin up, gear up, let's go. And so you're going to face a lot of tough times, but let's go, just keep moving. So I wanted my kids and grandkids and my friends to know that, kind of have that philosophy. I learned it from other folks that I really looked up to. But at the very end, I talk about some of the hard times you can go through. But then I said, "Hey, but it's not all chin downers for me, And I begin to explain. Chin downers are life's turnovers, but progress means ensuring more assists than turnovers. It's fair to say I've experienced way more sweetness and grace than dismal, passionless endeavors." And then at the very end, I say, even if you get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and all your plans go opaque, keep your chin up, put one foot in front of the other, and keep thinking. Before long, we'll get through this, and you won't believe what's next. And of course, that's a reference to a diagnosis that came my way about a year ago. So I just that's the only time I mention it in the book. But
I'd love to just jump in that a little deeper because
sure.
I know that it's fairly recent news for you,
Mm-hmm.
and how to navigate that emotionally, spiritually, that would be a gift for me and for others to have you share that part of the story with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a surprise to me. I've spent my whole, well, like most of us have in our lives, walking with people through things, but we're usually bedside, not in the bed, you know. And what I find out, there's a book called When Breath Becomes Air, and it's by a Dr. Calathini, who is a brain surgeon, and then he gets cancer. And what he realizes as he documents this fantastic book, the guy's vocabulary is like, off charts, but he realizes that he didn't really get it, even though he was treating people that were, very sick, and he was trying to help them. He didn't really get what it was like to be sick. And I think that's been my experience so far. And it's been a real gift to understand more intimately what people have gone through. And so when I heard that from my oncologist, I was like, oh, great. We all have a good friend who lives on our same island here, Dr. Lane, who says that when you get diagnosed, it can be a kind of a gift, because, the truth is that all of us are heading to the other side eventually,
Mm-hmm.
and for some reason, we sort of measure life in terms of longevity, in terms of length and time, instead of, what if we thought about it like, well, how about if we think about a life in terms of its impact, or, the things that a person was able to bring and take from their life, no matter how old they are. And, and the Bible's kind of clear on that kind of stuff. It says it does a lot of conundrums. There are people that are that have a lot of material wealth, but they're poor. The Proverbs says that. And I think there's also people that have lived shorter lives, but they've been fuller.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that I've been kind of like, I've lived like a few lives, a few lifetimes. I've gotten to do so many things.
Well, God bless you. I'll see you on Sunday.
Yep.
And thank you so much for your time, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
I love my time with my friend, Rick Enloe, and sharing this special guy with you. And I hope you enjoyed it too. I guarantee you'll love his book. It's called Low Hanging Truth, Short Stories for the Long Haul. It may make you laugh a bit, and for sure you'll ponder the wisdom of Mr. Enloe. Maybe it'll help you reveal some of your own wisdom through your life experiences. Thank you for joining us on Amazing Greats. God bless.